Now it's time for Tipisodes with quick tips you should know. Techniques you can implement into your workflow right here on A Tale, oh yeah, A Tale of Two Hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week's Friday episode. I'm your host, Andrew Johnston, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Friday shows, as you probably know, are generally a little bit shorter in content, the 10 to 15 minutes, and normally we try to have some sort of a clinical tip, but this week I wanted to address my thoughts about renewing with the ADHA. The first part of this episode is going to be a little bit of an explanation of why I'm not renewing, and at the end is kind of where I'm going, what I'm going to be doing, where I'm putting my money forward to, and what support still looks like, because I don't think that it's prudent for any of us just to give up and just step away completely. I think that we need to find alternative sources when things aren't serving our needs. So I encourage all of you, don't let the influencers, don't let podcasters even change your opinion of what you know to be true. Just like I know that my statements are true for me, I want your statements to be true for you. I hope the bigger message that you receive from this is that we all need to stay involved. We need to propel the profession forward in whatever way we can. We need to help serve and protect the citizens of our states. It's our duty and responsibility as healthcare professionals. And if the ADHA is serving you, great, stay there. I encourage that. But if it's not, let's look for some alternatives. And so to preface all of this, I've been an ADHA member for, I think, more than 10 years, I think. It's actually kind of blurry and I don't have access to my account anymore, so I don't actually know. It hasn't always been the best experience for me, and I really tried to get involved. I was at a state level for a long time. They didn't want me. I tried to help out at the national level. They didn't want me. But I'm not here to really talk about that or complain or lament about all of the past stuff, because honestly, none of that matters anymore. I believed in the mission, and I was happy to pay my dues at the time with the belief that the leadership was working on my behalf in the background. I didn't understand what it was. They kept saying advocacy, 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 advocacy. It's the biggest buzzword ever. The problem was that I had zero proof that they were working on my behalf. So I just asked a few questions, and this is kind of where I started getting down, in the rabbit hole of being in trouble or being whatever. I asked the questions to those who I thought were friends, and it was interesting to watch them slowly start distancing themselves from me. And I think it was because I wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid. They tried to give me the advocacy answers, the surface level answers that didn't make a lot of sense when I asked further clarifying questions like we should as healthcare providers, right? That we're taught to do that. I don't think they actually had any of the answers. And the questions weren't even all that hard. And so I think it was easier just to distance themselves from me and move on. 2 years ago, I'm pretty sure it was even on this podcast, I was done. I said I was done. I did not like how the association was representing the profession. I had some major concerns, as do tens of thousands of hygienists, about where my dues were going. And at this point, I was approached by the leadership, the incoming leadership, and they said, hey, don't leave, don't do anything. We're going to change. We're completely different than the ones that have been there before. And of course, you always want to believe this. They promised they were going to advocate more. They'd be more transparent for the everyday clinicians. That hasn't happened, and it's been deeply disappointing. 2025 will be the first time in a very long time that I will not be a member. And I think this is a personal choice for everyone. I encourage you, again, all to be a part of organizations that promise to represent you and your profession well. And again, if the ADHA is doing this for you, then please continue your membership. But I also ask you to ask questions. So for me, here are some of the questions that I had. So I've yet to see transparency on the number of members we have. The annual reports, they used to have an actual number for the membership. And ever since, I believe, the 2018-2019 report, it's been a lot more vague. They started listing the membership numbers after that year in a percentage. So in 2018-2019 report, they stated it's 15,600 and some change, which, by the way, depending on where you get your source of how many hygienists are practicing in the US, that's only about 7%. So it's not really that big of a percent that are actually members. Then after they stopped publishing the number and started using the percentage, they would say things like, we retained 79%, but we also added 1,500 new or reactivated members. Well, if you do the math on that, that means we lost more than 3,000 members, but only added back less than half of that. So it was very, very interesting that for 4 or 5 years now, you had to keep doing math upon math upon math until now you literally have no idea what the membership numbers are. It's kind of a guess because even using percentages is not going to be an exact number. I also have yet to see transparency in where our money is actually going. I have talked a lot to former leaders from various states, and for decades, these leaders have felt like they were hung out to dry by the national leadership. They have statewide issues. They ask for guidance only to be told to figure it out for themselves, which I find fascinating. Recently in Washington State, as where I'm from, there has been huge turmoil amongst the leadership. We had a lobbyist that had been there for 30 years who finally quit over all the craziness that's been going on. And from what I've been told, the members have sent complaints to the national level. And then the national leadership said, hey, this is a state issue. You guys need to fix it yourselves. The membership has been asking for several points of clarification from the state leadership, and no one has responded. Everyone's frustrated. And then one member offered their services for PR help to say, hey, let me help you fix this. I'll help advocate for you. And so they took a meeting with that person. And then right after that first meeting, she came away and she said, hey, I'm not going to be a part of that. Actually, I'm not going to help them with their PR because in the meeting, here's a lot of the things that they said. And one of them was, quote, we don't owe anyone an explanation, especially non-members, end quote. So I guess my point to all of this is, what are we paying the national fees for if they're not going to be supporting the state's leadership? And then why are we paying the state dues if they're not going to be supporting the members when they ask questions? None of that makes sense to me. I don't understand. And then to not feel obligated to actually answer the questions is baffling. I think also for me, philosophically, I've had a lot of internal conflict with the ADHA just in general. I don't align with some of the big agenda items that they've pushed out from the national level. I've had some issues with their statements during the pandemic. For being a very evidence-based industry, there were I feel like there were feelings put into policy and a lot of reactionary policy being put out there. And I understand that people are under a lot of pressure, but it was interesting that the types of policy that they put out there, based on quote unquote the science that they had at the time. But I feel like they selected this particular science that was going to help them into some tactics to increase membership and do things that were maybe not in the best interest, I think, of the public and of the hygiene body. I don't think it's totally their fault because I think, again, this was kind of a weird situation and there was a lot of pressure, but I don't think that the response or the reaction was met with measure and reason as I would have expected from a national organization. I also never really appreciated the approach to dental therapy. I love dental therapy. I think dental therapy is a great thing. Don't get me wrong. It's just that if it wasn't going to be regulated by us, if we weren't going to have really any hand in the structure of it, I don't understand then why we were pushing so hard on it. They were never going to be a part of our association. And I really do feel like we could have spent all that time and money trying to get hygienists out to the areas that people need them the most and working on things like teledentistry and mobile dentistry and some of the things that are really going to help the citizens of our states, as opposed to just trying to land a landmark victory that we would never actually be able to claim because it's not our group, it's a independent group. I also think that they intentionally picked a fight when they didn't have to by pushing so hard on that legislation advocacy. We could have supported it from afar. We could have put our name on the list of all the other people that supported it, but then let the special interest groups really take the lead on that. Instead, unfortunately, we incited a lot of anger from the dentist, causing a huge rift for many people downstream, not just anymore at the national level. And I won't get into it too much, but I do believe in reciprocity. I do believe that in a compact system that could work, as does the ADHA, but they chose to isolate themselves. They circumvented dental boards in addition to advocating for assessments that do not have any motor skills components. This lowers a bar for me that I believe is unsafe for the public. At the same time, they're angry when other groups try and lower the requirements for like the dental hygiene programs, for example, the educational requirements. So they want to be in charge, it feels like, of who gets to lower the standards for the dental hygienist. As long as it's the ADHA lowering it, then they're okay with it. I also do not agree with the movement to remove the requirement for third-party dental testing. That has been something that's been really floated about, not pushed too hard yet, but it's definitely an agenda item. Having experience working with dental boards, this creates an opportunity for an unsafe practitioner to access the public. And that's just not great. It puts educational institutions in a weird, unfair disadvantage, as they'll have potentially a certain liability that they don't want. Because when you think about it, they have non-dental people in charge of dental and dental hygiene programs, deans of departments, and they have a responsibility to the college as a whole. And so keeping the potentially unsafe student in and passing them all the way through benefits them, so they can get the money, which is how they measure their success. And it completely takes it away from the dental hygiene department to regulate fairly if that person is competent enough to pass. And so that is a large red flag for me. But I do also understand kind of the motivation behind it. And the motivation is, a lot of educators have been pushing for a long time to get rid of this third-party exam. They feel that what they do has been good enough. And again, for the most part, yes, it is. There's a good 2 to 3% of people who should never have a license because they don't pass any of the third-party exams. But I understand it from the educator perspective, because for them, seeing 98% of their students, or potentially even higher, depending on what school you go to, consistently pass every single one of the exams, they must start feeling like, hey, we're good enough, we're good enough, we're good enough. And I get that. I totally do. So when that body, which is a large portion of members, are students and educators, and if you look at their national conference, it's very educator heavy. This is their pipeline for membership. And I get that, but I don't think catering to this particular segment of the hygiene profession is the way to go. And then finally, I'm going to use a strong word here. I hate how the policy and agendas for a long time have created such a void in the relationship with our doctors. I addressed this with some of them before, and they kept telling me what a great relationship we have with the ADA, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think that they understand that, sure, maybe on a national level, maybe it's getting better, maybe it's not at the higher up levels. But what has happened, and I think what we can all agree on, is that we are seeing doctors who literally despise us as hygienists from the get-go. And that didn't used to be the way. It used to be like we always had a one-on-one relationship. It was Andrew the hygienist and Dr. So-and-so the doctor, and we would have a thing. But now it's coming even at the lower levels, where everyday dentist just despises the whole entire hygiene profession. And that we've done it to ourselves. We shot ourselves in the foot for a long time doing the things that we do. And I think that was detrimental and harmful. And so all that to say is, like, I have so many reasons why I'm just not going to do it anymore. These are my reasons. These don't have to be your reasons. Like I said, if it's serving you, stick with it. But where am I going? What am I going to do now? Well, I'll tell you what, the thing is, I want to support people who are honest and transparent and who have the best intentions. And so I'm going to put my money and my time with a grassroots organization called Dental Hygiene Advocates of Washington. As the name implies, it's in Washington State, and it's dental hygiene advocacy. And so they're going to be working on, the things that are pertinent for the best things that they were getting out of the WDHA and sticking to it. And there's a big support already there. And many of them are past members and leadership members of the WDHA. So I know that they know the space really well. I also like that they have just great intentions. They're transparent. Like I said, they're honest. I know what I'm getting with them. And I'm not trying to take a shot at anybody, but they're not seeking to elevate their own individual profiles, which I have seen in the past. They only want to serve the citizens of the state. And that's a cause I can get behind. I don't believe any of us should just give up, though. I think that it's really important that for you all, if the big national group isn't serving your needs, then there are other groups like this you can easily find. And again, if they are serving your needs, then stick with them. Ultimately, though, we are responsible for finding our own way to be involved and continue to fight the good fight. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, as healthcare professionals, we need to do our best to keep our patients safe. And I don't think that only holds true for when they are in our chair. I think that holds true for the policies, laws, and legislation that's enacted on their behalf that they may or may not be aware of or versed well enough to make that kind of decision. So we need to fight that fight for them. That's all I have for you this week. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy your weekend.
A tale of two hygienists.